The ladies on The View are cheering on what they call Kamala's FIRE campaign, but they also have some advice for her. Let's watch.
He's extremely triggered. Listen, he thought he was going to run against Joe Biden. He was kind of riding high on this wave of doing better. And today, the first general election poll from Morning Consult came out that has Kamala Harris ahead of Donald Trump, and she's been in the race for like 5 days. The dynamics of the race are fundamentally shaken up, and I have to give her credit. I had wanted Biden to step aside and pass the baton. She wasn't my first choice because I was worried she was going to run to the left. And she is running a smart general election campaign message. Her message is the economy, paid family leave. She says the core focus of her campaign and presidency will be restoring the middle class. The one thing she does need to lean into and is capable of doing is the border. This is an issue that Republicans rightly have criticized her over, but she needs to articulate that her administration negotiated a border package that Donald Trump blocked. If she can do that, there's absolutely a path in these next 3 months for her to win. And I've got to say, this campaign is fire.
Ana Navarro ended up calling out the GOP for their vile attacks on Kamala Harris. Let's watch.
And I wish Republicans were doing that. We're making this about the issues, the real issues that America deserves a debate on. But instead, they are so triggered and so wacko, they are shooketh. They are out there saying vile remarks about Kamala Harris. By the way, let's start with that. Let's pronounce this. Kamala.
Now, shooketh should not be a word that anybody says out loud. That's an internet word. These are people trying to be hip because they read things on the internet. And it's been a week of that, hasn't it, Amber? Between the brat stuff, the coconut army, that woman with a printout of Kamala HQ Twitter with the brat green on Jake Tapper. It's just a lot to take in. But I think The View has a weird centrist lean. And I think their audience is a very specific facet of America. I think it's suburban middle class people who like the uniparty, who like when everybody does kumbaya bipartisan legislation. And look, the bipartisan bill to address the crisis at the border was one that I think conservatives were going for until Donald Trump says, no, we can't have this happen under the Biden administration because people will think it's a win for Biden. I have talked to regular working Americans, and unfortunately, that is how things work. Because Roe was overturned when Biden was president, I have talked to many regular working people who believe that Joe Biden did that because he was president when it happens. So I understand why Trump believes that, but putting partisan politics over delivering on policy for the American people is not so good. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris is someone who on issues has been to the right of Joe Biden. The handling of the border crisis, hiring more Border Patrol agents, ensuring that the numbers of people crossing the border goes down because they are still cracking down and putting migrants trying to cross the southern border into detention centers, deporting more Haitian migrants than any administration of the past 10 years. These are some of the things that have happened under the Biden administration. And we're not really getting a clear answer as to what was Kamala and what was other members of the Biden administration. They're definitely going to have to sort that out. But I don't think it's smart to say, you know, we're the same as conservatives on the border. They just need to be on the message precise about what they were trying to get done in that bipartisan bill. But they're afraid to get specific about policy. And I think focusing on vibes, this is the election where that's not going to work.
Yeah, I think The View is a bit overly optimistic on Kamala's chances here. I think the reality is that what her elevation to the top of the ticket does is it puts us right back where we were basically the morning of that CNN debate, which was Donald Trump was still leading in all of the swing states just by a slightly smaller margin. And these post-election polls are not super useful because every time a candidate announces, they get a post-announcement bump. But prior to her announcement, every poll that had been done with a head-to-head matchup between Trump and Biden versus Trump and Harris actually had Trump performing better against Kamala Harris. That's going to be a problem for her once that post-announcement bump bump dissipates, and people are going to be taking a very hard look at her record because she has all of the baggage of the Biden administration's failures with none of the possible charm that Joe Biden might have had in 2020 that convinced Americans that he was going to be a return to normalcy, just old Uncle Joe, Scranton Joe. She doesn't have that same credibility with the working class, and particularly with unions that Joe Biden did when he was running for president. And she has a lot of positions that are very unpopular with the working class. And when she was the border czar, she didn't accomplish a whole lot, but we do know that she has rather progressive opinions on how to deal with illegal immigration. During one of the Democratic primary debates in 2020, she raised her hands on giving illegal aliens free health care. She also said that illegal crossing should be decriminalized. And she also wants to abolish ICE, according to her own words, and likened ICE agents to the KKK. In addition, she opposes fracking. She wants electric vehicle and other energy mandates that would be absolutely crippling in places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, and has also talked about her prosecutorial record in really bizarre ways by simultaneously making it out that she is tough on crime when it comes to truant children and marijuana, but soft on crime when it comes to people who are rioting in the summer of 2020, which I think is the exact opposite of where most Americans stand on how they want to see justice doled out in this country. All of those things she's going to have to answer for as soon as she gets off of this wave of excitement via memes and doing teleprompter-led events. If there's any journalists worth their salt, when she finally sits down with them, it's going to be very difficult for her to weasel her way out of this. I mean, remember when she was appointed the border czar and then finally pressed on why she didn't visit the border, she gave this horrible answer about how she also hasn't been to Europe, which was a complete non sequitur and really turned people against her. We now have the media, though, covering for her, claiming that she was never actually the border czar, even though they all used that exact term 2 years ago. It's going to be a long 100 days, to be sure. There's a lot to examine about Kamala Harris's history in politics.
And if there's one thing I know about the next 100 days, it's that the ladies of The View are not representative of the American electorate whatsoever. And I think the American electorate is changing in some interesting ways. I think the youth vote matters more this election than ever. We saw an 11-point increase in turnout from 2016 to 2020 to about 50%. Now, what we've seen at the national level is about 66% turnout, which countries like Australia look at and they say that is abysmal, that is the amount of people who are of voting age that are participating in presidential elections in the United States. It's kind of crazy. But I think if we get the youth vote, which I fully believe is possible, up to that 66%, that could determine the election. So Kamala has some choices to make because all the while there's a lot of economic fear-mongering around her plans to ban fracking. Young people are considering that there will not be an economy at all unless we get global climate change under control and reduce emissions. And Biden has paired a lot of these progressive policies around the economy with these carrot policies, ensuring private companies are investing in green energy, but also having huge jobs programs. So I went and talked to workers in Nevada at Brightline West, one of the nation's first high-speed rail tracks. I believe it will be the first high-speed rail that will be completed. The administration ensured that that labor is all good paid union jobs. And the workers like that this is, number one, a good paying job, but that it's stable and it's a job that they'll have for a long time. So while there's these temporary, upsets in the economy when you ban fracking and people who are working in the fracking industry end up having to start looking for another job, they're making sure that there are other good paying union jobs available. Kamala Harris needs to say, I am pro-union. That means not picking someone like Mark Kelly, who is the only Democrat in the Senate who hasn't sponsored the PRO Act. It also means on the Gaza front, not picking someone like Shapiro, who is someone who called peaceful protesters equivalent to KKK members. He made that comparison. These are two candidates that will lose her the youth vote. The youth vote has a better chance of determining the election than the conservative never Trump vote. You need to consider that the polling is done by likely voters, and young people don't typically pick up landlines. So if this is going to be a campaign that's run according to centrists in the polls, I think it's a campaign that Kamala will lose.
Yeah, we'll have to see what some of the newer polling says over the next couple of weeks as this post-announcement bump sort of dissipates. And I would also just point out that a lot of polls now are conducted online, not just on landline phones. So we have to make sure we're looking at a smattering of polls and not just one, which is why the Real Clear Politics average is usually pretty helpful, as is 538. We're going to continue to track those and let you know next week where things are at. But that's going to do it for us this week on Rising, and it was great being with you today, Jess.
It was good to be back for Rising Friday. I will see everyone on Monday. Have a good weekend, y'all.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Bye, y'all.